Okay, you are live.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Right here. Welcome and thank you everyone for joining us for our Catholic Social Teachings Ministry presentation tonight on Care of the Earth. I want to thank everyone. On behalf of myself, I'm Amy Krakauer and Chris Oppen and all of the CST team. We're super excited about tonight. I do want to say thank you for signing in, and if you did not sign in with your email address, please on your way out sign up so that you can get information about our upcoming talks and speakers and presentations. All the information that we are going to compile tonight we'll be able to give out for you. As well as any other information that we might want to get out to you. So we're going to begin the meeting as we begin all things with prayer. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Amen. Good Lord, creator of us all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to give you the glory and allow us to learn and expand. Please open our hearts and our minds to learn and maybe learn something new. Also give each other enough space to grow as you want us to grow and allow us to take care of your creation the way that you want us to. Amen. Amen. All right, when I knew that this presentation was going to come up this session, I was super excited, but when Karen told me that we were going to have this particular speaker, I was overjoyed, and I wanted to be the one to introduce her to any other information that we might want to get out to you. A little bit of a presentation that we haven't done before, and it's going to be wonderful. This is going to be a presentation on Care of the Earth. I have only been excited about this since, 2015, when Pope Francis wrote an incredible encyclical called Laudato. I read it and I was moved to action, and I was moved so much that I started studying it deeply myself, and then was super excited to know that our Archdiocese was going to be moved to that call as well. So that is how I was introduced to this special lady who is going to be speaking to us tonight. She is the former director of the University of Georgia Office of Environmental Science. Yeah. Yes, go dogs. I guess. I don't know why I said that. Wow, it's contagious. She's a biologist. She's a master gardener. She's a devout Catholic. She's a heck of a nice lady. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan Varlamoff.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'm excited to be here with you, and I will begin background on why we really need to do something first. In 2015, which I'm so excited that I even asked to work with him on this, and I will tell you that story as we my fellow scientists at the University of Georgia, we wrote an action plan for his encyclical that is now being used all over the country. So I saw the opportunity as a biologist, as a Catholic biologist, to in the teachings of our church, which emphasize caring for creation, humility, caring for the poor, to do something about this. And so I even see the Catholic Church as being a big factor in mitigating climate change. We have 2.2 billion Catholics. We have a tremendous amount of land, and there's no reason we can't galvanize ourselves to make changes in our behavior. So let's begin the presentation. I've entitled it Climate Change, the Science, Its Impact, and the Catholic Response. I'm going to begin and end with quotes from Pope Francis. He took the name of Francis from St. Francis of Assisi, and that is the patron saint of ecologists. And so he is, this encyclical, I'm sure most of you haven't read it, it's 185 pages. I've read it several times. So he says, it is our profound conviction that the future of the human family depends also on how we safeguard the gift that our Creator entrusted to us. And he talks about how we are an integral part of creation. A fellow biologist says it is our life support system. We cannot afford to destroy it, or we destroy ourselves. Okay, so this is our common home. He calls it our common home. And this is from a picture from the NASA 17 mission in 1972. Unfortunately, I remember this. And I'm sure some of you also have remembered that. And you can see this is, I mean, this is our only planet. There's no planet B. We're going to answer these three questions. Must we change? Can we change? Will we change? Now I want to say that this slide set, many of the slides are from Al Gore. He gives trainings throughout the country, and he gave one in Atlanta. And I was chosen to be there. There were 2,000 people. And we had Catholics from all over the country, you know, working on creation care that were there. So it was very exciting. So first, must we change? Can we continue living the way we are? Let's take a look. Okay, so this is the atmosphere. And we tend to think that it goes on and on to space. No, it's a very thin layer above the Earth. And it's within this atmosphere that all the trouble is being caused right now. We unfortunately are dumping 110 million tons of man-made global pollution into the atmosphere every 24 hours. And here solar radiation heats the Earth. Some is bounced back into space. Some infrared rays are collected underneath in the atmosphere, but unfortunately with increased CO2 concentrations, more of the infrared rays are captured here between the atmosphere and the Earth, and that is causing this warming. What are the factors? You probably know many of these. Transportation, air, cars, trucks, coal-fired power plants. The good news is, in Georgia, we're retiring almost all the coal-fired power plants. Industrial processes, manufacturing processes, where we use fossil fuels. Industrial agriculture. When they have the cows together, they emit methane gas, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. Landfills. With decomposition of the waste, methane gas is produced. And we've got so many landfills across the country. But the good news is we're learning to capture that methane and use it for electricity. The other thing is forest burning, you know, the big uproar over the burning of the Amazon, the lungs of our earth, the lungs of our earth. When you burn the trees, you're giving off CO2, but you're also burning the receptors. They take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen for us. If you remember high school biology, we breathe in oxygen, give off CO2. The trees take in CO2 and release oxygen. We need to be in balance.
So burning trees is a double whammy.
Yes.
You're destroying your ability to produce oxygen while you're dumping carbon into the air.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you know that the Pope jumped on that. When that happened, he was extremely concerned. I believe he went down there for a conference even to show, you know, his support. Whoops.
And permafrost, you didn't mention that.
Okay, let's talk. Yeah.
Because I saw a 60 Minutes piece on that with the Russian scientists talking
Yes.
about the release of CO2 from permafrost thawing.
Yes, that's a big, big thing too. Thank you for bringing that up. The largest source of global warming pollution is the burning of fossil fuels. And you see it follows the Industrial Revolution. As we got more efficient at A, bringing the fossil fuels out of the ground, and B, using them in manufacturing industrial processes, you know, it's enormous now. So what's happened with increased CO2? The global surface temperature has gone up. And again, you see with the Industrial Revolution from 1880. "16 of the hottest years on record have occurred since the year 2001. 2016 was the hottest year. Did that do the same thing?
Yeah, go all the way to the top.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm doing, Al Gore has like 500 and some slides. And so I took those that pertain to Georgia because some areas of the world are being disproportionately affected by climate change. Just an example, I was at a conference a number of years ago, and the president of Bangladesh was there, at least 5 to 7 years ago. And he said, you know, it's becoming almost intolerably hot in our country. So people are already migrating to India, and India is putting up a wall. Sound familiar? To keep them out. So, but I'm going to just hone in on Georgia. So this is the 30-year moving average. You can see, you know, we've gone up 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Now this is a projection that days per year above 95 degrees by 2100, they expect 85 days. Now I work with some of these scientists, in fact, that do this modeling. Yes?
Just wonder, someone's might be able to see better. The light here, doesn't shut them all off.
Yeah, that switch back there, right by the door.
Okay, good.
Is that okay with you?
It's perfect for me.
Okay.
I can see better too.
Okay.
See better too. So what these scientists have been telling me is that in their modeling, they're so concerned with alarming the public that they sometimes minimize their projections. So my feeling is it's going to be even greater than 85 days. The land is heating up, the air is heating up, so are the oceans. And the problem with heating up the oceans is the coral reefs are dying. They are necessary for the aquatic life. They're bleaching out. This is a terrible thing.
Are you going to talk about that in more detail?
No, I won't because I can't drill down too much in any one area. I'm going to give you a broad overview. Then I'm going to tell you some good news about how we're working to change, you know, to renewable energy, and then what the Catholic Church is doing. So the other thing is with climate change, we're seeing increase in the number of storms and the intensity of the storms. And so these are 3 Category 4 hurricanes that occurred in 2015. I know you know the hydrologic cycle from high school. But, so we have evaporation, precipitation, and then water comes back to the sea. Problem is, in a warming world, this is on steroids, evaporation. So you're going to get increased storms with greater downpours. This is in Montana in 2010, a humongous rainstorm. This is, do you remember this Hurricane Michael in Georgia, South Georgia? Decimated the crops, the cotton. How about the pecan trees? Pecan orchards were just
Level.
leveled. Now, I worked in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, so I'm on Facebook with farmers and scientists. You know, all my friends I'm retired, but I like to keep in touch. Oh my goodness, they were putting pictures up there of, you know, the damage down there. They're selling, you know, pecan wood for furniture. But I know that it takes 8 to 10 years. Is it 15? Some of you know better than me. For a pecan tree to
Mature.
bear nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son has a pecan tree and he said, Mom, in 8 years. So far, no nuts.
And the pecan farmers said after that, most of these guys are out of business. They can't live 15 years and wait for another crop. Their trees are gone.
Yeah.
So.
How about Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah.
So, with these increased downpours, and especially we've got so much concrete, asphalt, we're getting these huge floods. And so heavy downpours in the Atlanta area have increased 75% since 1950. Does anybody remember the storm in 2008 when it rained like 20 inches?
Yeah.
So I was working or I wasn't working. We have a subdivision that has a river that runs through it. And so we've got hills and valleys. And so when the river overflowed, filled up the little depression there, and you know the water was over my waist. We could not get out for 3 days. So I had my husband take my picture, wading in the water here, and I emailed it to the dean. I said, love to come to work, but cannot. I'm marooned. However, one of our friends is an Ebola expert. He's the Ebola expert in the world. And there was a crisis in Africa. He had to get out. So and he's very courageous. He loves adventure. There he was with a canoe, found a canoe someplace, his bags in there, and canoeing out of the subdivision. This is from Al Gore's slide set, and he's very, very respectful of the Pope. And so he had this in there. And the gravest effects of all attacks on the environment are suffered by the poorest. They usually live on marginal land, you know, in the floodplains. They live near the power plants. And I know and they live by landfills. When I was a young mother, I shut a landfill, and I learned about environmental justice and fought a case even in Atlanta and saw that all these blacks, minorities, were living around 4 open landfills. And it's terrible. It's because the land is cheap. So, the same heat that evaporates water from the ocean is pulling out the water from the land and causing severe droughts. Remember this?
Yeah.
Lake Lanier, 2008. We were in South Africa at the time with a family on a safari, and we thought, let's just turn on the evening news, CNN International. Number 1 news item was Lake Lanier. Atlanta, Georgia, running out of water. And we came very close to running out of drinking water. In fact, the head of the EPD, Dr. Carol Couch, approached me and she said, Susan, I don't know what we're going to do. In a few weeks, we will have no more drinking water. And so we put together a collaboration between UGA Extension and EPD to get this massive water conservation program going, particularly in Atlanta. And we reduced water consumption by 26%, which is enormous, and it did save the drinking water supply. Again, a drought, and this is what it's, in this year, 2016, peach yields were down 85%. It is wreaking havoc on the farmers, and not just in Georgia, all across the country. About 7 years ago, a farmer wrote into the New York Times saying, I don't know how much longer I can continue farming. The weather is so unpredictable. Hotter years typically have more fires. The number of high wildfire potential days in Georgia is projected to double by 2050. Remember this? This was horrible, 2017. All these fires in South Georgia. 48% of Georgia's population lives in areas at elevated risk of wildfire. My husband and I live by Stone Mountain, and we climb Stone Mountain on the weekends. And during this period, we were on the top of Stone Mountain, and we could smell the fires from South Georgia.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what about these kids with asthma? What about the elderly? People with compromised immune systems? Okay, so here are the worldwide extreme weather catastrophes and their increase from extreme temperatures, droughts, fires, floods, mudslides, storms. I don't know if you remember, maybe about 10 years ago in Paris, they had extreme heat. 17,000, mostly elderly people died.
It was this summer too, this summer.
Yeah, they don't have air conditioning. And you know, what happens is the young people, they're, taking vacations, and their parents were there in Paris just roasting and dying. Look at this, unnamed glacier in 1935. Oh, no more glacier, completely melted. This is a declining ice mass in Greenland. Now, when you're decreasing the ice mass, the sea levels are going to rise. And here are the 10 cities at risk from sea level rise in 2070. We're talking Manhattan underwater, but Florida is already in bad shape, Miami being number one. I am from New York, New Jersey area, so when they had the superstorm Sandy, it was a complete and utter disaster for them. Up, this is Georgia. This is Tybee Island. You have the dates, maybe not there. This was in 2015. It was a super moon. This is Highway 80. It's the only road that goes onto Tybee Island, goes in and out. It was completely flooded. And
That's
again,
not a storm.
no,
That's just time.
right?
Yeah,
A
right.
super moon.
Yeah.
That's because the sea level has risen. It's risen 9 inches in the last 80 years. It used to flood the road a few times a year. It's 100 times a year now. So they have a climate change action plan, and part of their action plan is to raise the road. And again, I'm on Facebook with these scientists in South Georgia. So this was posted, and we were all like, my goodness. Okay, the U.S. Department of Defense has said climate change will likely lead to food and water shortages, pandemic disease, disputes over refugees, and natural disasters in regions across the globe. We already know about food. Water, of course, when you get droughts. Pandemic disease, I'm about to discuss. But refugees, we're already seeing that. And they're talking about even Central America, that some of these refugees are coming because of the drought. They can't farm. Georgia, climate change is predicted to lower Georgia's soy yields by up to 34%, and corn yields by as much as 46% by 2050. Climate change is a medical emergency. In 2016, the Atlanta area experienced elevated levels of air pollution for 118 days. You know when they have, I think it's code orange? They say young people, the elderly, people with asthma don't go out. And we know that there's also this issue of ozone, that when you have increased heat and humidity with vehicle emissions, the ozone levels rise to dangerous levels. When they do, people are visiting the emergency room at greater frequencies. And the CDC did that study. And again, it's many of the minorities. They don't always have air conditioning either. Now, tropical diseases are supposed to be in the tropics, but they're spreading all over now because, again, in a warming climate, they have greater areas to grow and reproduce and live. And Zika's not too far off Georgia coast. But you know, it's crazy. Like dengue fever. Who ever heard of dengue fever in the United States? But, yes, here we have it. Okay, this is the mosquito, the vector for the Zika virus. And again, it's able to go out farther, breathe more, because of this warming climate. This is sad. We are now at risk of losing up to 50% of all land-based species in this century. This is the golden frog from Costa Rica. The University of Georgia had a campus in Costa Rica, and I had the good fortune to bring some students there. And so I learned about this golden frog, and it lives at high elevations in the mountains. And, excuse me. And as the climate got warmer, it kept going up the mountain. So finally, it kind of went off the top of the mountain. It's endangered. The cost of carbon is enormous. It's the #1 threat to the global economy. So must we change? I think we answered our question. Yes.
Yeah.
According to the Army, it's also right up there, close to #1 threat for national security.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. At UG, I remember I wrote an article and I put that yes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Emphatically yes. Can we change? God willing, we can. And we are. So let's take a look. We have the solutions at hand. This is incredible. Green energy progress. This is wind projection. They expected it to be 30 gigawatts by 2010. They've exceeded it by 16 times. It's super news. You probably all have heard of T. Boone Pickens, the oil man. He's well into his 80s. And I used to listen to his podcasts. So funny. Anyway, he knows the oil's finished. It's finished. He knows it's a threat. So he decided to take his money, it's a considerable fortune, and invest in windmills, wind farms. So they did a study, and through the center of the country, we have an enormous amount of wind. So he's got his, windmills all through the center of the country. And so he's contributing enormously in helping in that respect. This is the capacity here. It's on wildfire.
No comment about the
fly lines and birds that get killed with all these wind turbines? I mean, that's
Yes.
a very real thing.
I know, it is. They do, they do have to study the migratory patterns of the birds. They do. It is a concern.
Well, the wind and the birds, birds are in the wind pattern, and the more of these we put up, since we're saying we are all connected, we're connected to the birds as well as, and that we are.
But when they
How
migrate,
clear about killing all these raptors is.
no, I agree. They do study the migratory patterns. They've got to be careful. They've got to be careful where they site them. Whoops, wrong side. By the way, Georgia Tech did a study on wind potential in Georgia. Georgia Tech did a study on wind potential in Georgia, and they discovered that, except for a little offshore, nobody's going to want with the beaches and all that, offshore wind, and a little bit in the mountains, we have very little opportunity for wind energy. But we could supply worldwide electricity consumption over 40 times over. Here's where we can shine, pun intended. Solar energy. The projection was that we would grow 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. We've exceeded that by 75 times in 2016. In developing countries like India, where my pastor comes from, 400 million people are without electricity. And I went to a conference once with a physicist, and he said, there's not enough metal in the ground to put in land electricity lines. So they're just skipping over that and going right to solar, simply because the cost has come down. A little bit like they went from no phones to cell phones. They did not do the landlines. What we don't realize too, there's some brilliant minds out there working tirelessly behind the scenes with developing countries too, to try to get this all done and right. This one just did.
What's a gigawatt?
A gigawatt. My husband's an engineer. I'm going to ask him.
So we can be impressed.
I think it's 1 billion watts.
Why is this doing the same thing?
Go all the way up to the top. All the way up to the top where you have an arrow.
Here?
Yep.
1,000 million watts.
Okay. Another engineer here.
Can you talk about what Georgia's done on solar in the last several years? The Georgia legislature and Georgia Power have done pretty incredible advances in use of solar in Georgia.
You know what? I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
And when I get to that, I will ask you to speak.
Okay.
How's that?
Sure.
These are world solar PV installations. We've made enormous progress. That's because the cost of the silicon solar cells has gone down from $79 in 1975 to 41 cents in 2016. Plains, Georgia. This could be Jimmy Carter's farm.
Yeah.
Georgia ranks 11th in the U.S. for installed solar capacity. I want to tell a story about how this all began. A number of years ago, it may have been about 7 years ago, when I was working at UGA, there were grants for farmers to put solar on their barns and their fields, their peanut drying sheds. And I let the farmers know about this money, and I helped write grants. The first adopters of solar power in Georgia were the farmers. It's thrilling. And there are solar panels all over South Georgia. Okay, I'm going to ask you to talk about.
Well, I'm just going to say, I know that the Georgia legislature has done a lot to encourage solar. Georgia Power is part of the Southern Company, which is Alabama Power, Missouri Power, and a lot of solar. The price of solar kilowatt in Georgia now is practically the same as it is for fossil fuels. So if there's access to solar on your grid, it's a good way to go.
Yes,
I
yes.
saw a news story a couple weeks ago that in, I think Dalton, somewhere where there was carpet factories that was being converted by a Korean company to make solar panels here in Georgia. It was going to provide a lot of jobs in that area.
No, it's a tremendous opportunity in Georgia. Isn't it Google or Amazon, Ivan, that they're putting in there?
Google has a solar farm there just for the cloud computing.
Yeah, Google. A huge operation, yes.
One of the things that concerns me about this, like with Georgia though, is Georgia doesn't compensate people who generate power on par with the big power companies. So if big power companies are selling their power for 12 cents a kilowatt hour, we get like 4 to 8 cents or 6 cents, something like that, and we generate it and put it on the grid. And from my perspective, I'm convinced that the solution to this is not big corporations doing big solar farms. It's democratizing solar power and spreading across, like you said, the barns, the roofs, everywhere, to where it's everywhere. Everybody's doing it, you know, and you can.
That's scary
increase
business.
Well, it scares Georgia Power. And a lot
Southern
of
companies scared to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when I worked at UGA, there's no reason that Tipton shouldn't be on total solar energy, solar power. They weren't happy with my idea. That's all I'm
So
gonna say.
I'm just saying the scale is imbalanced. If they're driving people away in a sense, even though there's been some advances made, they're not really incentivizing on the same scale that they could if they wanted to, because they're tipping toward the big corporations like Georgia Power in that.
It's gonna take us all getting involved.
Yeah.
How does a smaller entity like me in my house store this power that my solar panels are collecting? We don't have that great technology yet, do we, that we can create this from our roof and store it in our house and use it?
If you were to do that, that would be a closed system to where you would have to have batteries
Right.
for the
we don't have
nighttime
that.
hours to do that. That's much more expensive,
You
but
could
just,
go off the grid.
yeah.
Yeah, I unfortunately can't get into that now, but, yeah, I'm sure people,
Like if
Yeah, they-
Transfib wanted to, put solar panels up and generate, your own power, you would have no way to, you can sell it now, I believe, in Georgia. You can sell
Yes.
it to the big power companies, but you cannot store it and use it for the 18 rainy days in a row or something.
I mean, just like the cost of solar panels is decreasing, that's the same case for the cost of battery processing for that. So
yeah, and I'm
it's
gonna
just-
show you that too. That's here in the slides.
as technology advances, that becomes more.
It's going like a freight train. The train's out of the station. And we, as citizens, have to keep pushing. Let's give credit where credit is due, the Vatican. 2008, Pope Benedict put this array up. He said he was the greenest country on earth. Well, it's a very small country. It's all right.
That takes up probably about 1/8 of the country, right there.
This is on top of their auditorium, and, he did a lot more discussing about the environment and doing that we were aware of at the time. Okay, I have to talk fast. Oh, no, I don't. That's not this one. Okay, enough solar energy reaches the Earth every hour to fill all the world's energy needs for a full year. And again, this is a huge opportunity for renewable energy. We've also got hydro, geothermal. Energy is going to be generated locally, I feel, and distributed locally. And it's going to take a while to get this all worked out, but different areas of the world have different opportunities. Okay, so this is the energy storage market, the batteries. And again, the price used to be very high. It's great to have windmills, it's great to have solar panels. But when the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine, we gotta do something. You know, we still need electricity, so we've got to store it. And again, we're working on all this now, but the cost, the amount of storage capacity we have has increased and the price is coming down. This is one thing. In Georgia, at all churches and schools, we can put LED lights. There are grants for this. Georgia Interfaith Power and Light does energy audits, and then you can apply for grants to put in LED lights. My parish got $3,000, and we changed all of our lights.
There's a question on the previous slide. Did you talk about how, or did you say how that energy was stored? How it's stored?
It's stored with batteries.
And it would,
But kept stored where? I mean, physically how?
When you have a closed system with your own solar panels on your own home, you are equipped with batteries that catch that and hold that, and that's yours.
I
This
meant on a
is temporary
larger,
storage, like
larger
overnight.
scale.
It's temporary storage, yeah.
Okay.
No matter at what capacity the batteries or solar panels are, it's temporary storage.
And then the next day or next 2 or 3 days, whenever the sun comes out, or whatever, they charge them.
Yes.
Like the lady here said, you know, this has increased the technology so much. I come from the Dominican Republic, and we had solar energy back in the early 80s installed. A company out of Taiwan came and helped from a small town. And now back then we used to have 16 batteries to store solar. And the panels cover the whole roof facing south of the house. Now we only need half of the south-facing roof, 3 batteries. Now, this was 3 years ago that was installed, the new one. And it changes, I mean,
The technology's
Yes.
increased, yeah, it's increasing enormously.
I need so much energy to run the whole house.
Yeah.
Well, that was my question is,
The battery that you store in the batteries.
yes, but
Back then, the technology was not very good. We needed more batteries to store the energy for the night. There's no light. Even though you don't need direct sunlight, as long as you have, you know, thin clouds, a little bit of light, you'll recharge the batteries.
so what we saw at the Vatican.
It doesn't have to be direct sunlight.
Okay.
Yeah, but the batteries, technology, it's amazing, the advancement.
Thank
Any
you.
good sun
Thank
burn,
you.
good
You know what? You know what, these are great questions, but let me get through the presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions in the end, okay? I just want to get through this all. So, we're now moving to electric vehicles. Again, the train's out of the station, it's roaring down the tracks. And I have a hybrid car, gets 50 miles to the gallon of gasoline, but my next car will be electric. But all of these car makers now are making electric cars. Will we change? Well, we can. We are. So, in 2015, every nation on Earth agreed to work together to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And the United States is still in this agreement. It cannot be broken until after this election. What are we doing in Georgia? They're very progressive in Atlanta. They're like one of 100 top resilient cities in the world. And they're targeting emission reductions of 20% below 2009 levels by 2020 and 40% by 2030. By the way, the sustainability coordinator for Atlanta is none other than Ted Turner's grandson. So it runs as a family, and he's doing a great job. He's so conscientious.
Susan, how are they going to achieve that today? Is there any plan associated with that in Atlanta?
Yes, yes. Okay, Ted Turner's son-in-law is Rutherford Seidel, and he has a better buildings challenge, which he's challenging all, the big companies to reduce their energy use by 20%. I believe they're just about to achieve that. So yes, there's a number of different programs. Okay, the People's Climate March in Washington, D.C. in 2017. Do people care about climate change? They do.
Yeah.
And guess who was there? Me. And you know what was exciting? It was a march of all faiths. There, anybody could march, but all the faiths were there. And the biggest contingent of all the faiths were Catholics. I was so proud. And that's because of Pope Francis. And I don't know if you can see me, but I am there holding the Laudato Si, the front cover of the action plans. All right. I was looking for attention.
I like your t-shirt.
I was looking for attention, and I had business cards in my pocket with my name and the URL for the action plan. And you know what? It's being used all over the country, and I met a lot of people that were very interested. So it was a cool experience. And I sort of liked hanging out with the New York group. Of course, I'm from New York, but they were there en masse with all these fun flowers. And they're kind of dancing in the street with their flowers. It's so funny. Okay, and then talk about what we're doing here in Georgia through the Catholic Church. Again, as I said, when I heard Pope Francis was coming out with his encyclical, someone prompted me at a conference you've got to help the Pope. You've got to do something. Write to him. And so I said, I am really Susan Nobody Varlamoff, please. So after saying it 3 times, okay, all right. And I got a very nice note saying, thank you very much, I'll pray for you. That did not work. But I was able to get to the Archbishop. I figured if I get the Archbishop, he reports to the Pope, maybe he can intervene for me. But he laughed at me too, and he said, Susan, it's an inside job, please, what are you thinking? Anyway, but he said, we need an implementation plan. This encyclical is a plea to the people of the planet. It's beautifully written, and scientists did help write it. And he talks about church history in the Bible and our whole history of the church, caring for creation and the catastrophe now. But he doesn't have, what can we do? So in there, and I have a copy here, I worked on this with a group of scientists at the University of Georgia. Sure. And we addressed the issues in the encyclical in 10 different chapters, and we had actions for parishioners and parishes from simple, medium, and harder, but there's something for everybody to do. And we had the big kickoff on at UGA, because it was, done at UGA, and it was a magnificent day. Sometimes God gives you everything in one day. And on the right is Dr. Marshall Shepard. He is a famous climate scientist. He worked for NASA. He was the president of the American Meteorological Association, and he's Baptist. So we had about 8 scientists, some Catholic, and many others not, who so believed in the Pope as a moral authority that they're willing to put their own expertise into this action plan. Of course, the Archbishop, me, and the guy on the left, he is a Baptist minister, the Reverend Gerald Durley. As a student, he marched with Martin Luther King. He's a powerful speaker. And he said that these environmental issues are the civil rights issue of our day. Everybody deserves clean water, clean air, and clean land. And also that the poorest of the poor are the most disaffected by this. And this was at the Catholic Center, and it was, as I said, a magical day. All the scientists could come. I never could have done that ever in the 18 years I was there, to get them all together on one day at one time, because they're got research classes, they're out of town, they're something. So because they were so good about putting their reputations on the line, there I am in the red and UGA colors. I used my 5 precious minutes to introduce each one of them and ask them to stand and give a short bio on each one, because they really deserve to be honored. So these are the chapters in the action plan, and you can see them all there. And what we're doing is now we're creating creation care teams in the churches to implement these actions. And some are easier, some are harder. And it's a creation care team that makes the decision on what to do. You have no idea the talent you have in your church until you stand up at Mass and say, okay, we are going to implement a creation care this action plan, and we need people interested in, environmental protection. So in my church, I've got 3 engineers on my team, an official from the CDC, an high official from the EPA. He's in charge of solid waste management for the Southeast, which of course includes recycling. The director of an organic company, Organic Valley, a videographer, she does all the videos, me, a biologist. So I put out a call and we got 45 people. So I sense that people do care and they want to do something. I'll just let you read this. Our world depends on it. Just a reminder. And again with Pope Francis quote, what kind of world we want to leave our children? Those are my grandchildren. And jokes me up. They're so adorable. They're bigger now, but they're walking into their future. Their future is what we leave them. And it's up to us to do something. And as a Hopi Indian chief said, we are the people we are waiting for. It's up to us. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do now is also show a very quick video, because it's so overwhelming to see climate change. It's a global phenomenon. We feel that we personally can't do anything. Collectively, we can make a huge difference. I will give you one example in Georgia. At the turn of the last century, the state was covered in cotton farms from the mountains to the sea. The boll weevil came and decimated the cotton. The farmers had to think of another crop. They chose pine trees. Now, meanwhile, through this whole period, we're recording the temperature. The trees provide shade for the land. The temperature went down 1 degree Fahrenheit with the change of the land cover. That's huge. Now, the other example I'm going to give is a modern example of a young woman. Actually, she's a teenager, Greta Thunberg, who was so upset about climate change, when she was 11. She asked her mother, she wanted to do a climate strike in front of Parliament, and she was a climate protester of 1. Yeah. 1 year later, 4 million people were on the streets. So I'm going to show you a video that I think is beautiful, and it shows the earth can heal itself if we just cooperate.
Sorry. It was there.
Is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protests. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. With this alone,
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was there for an hour.
this my nature is built to life. We are living in the
Maybe
beginning
the
of
microphone there,
the
but the speaker.
Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protests. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about, but what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions can make a massive difference.
Pretty cool, right?
But only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions give just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now when we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
It's true, and it's simpler than we think, but we have to do it again on a massive scale. Now, I just want to say one thing. As a biologist, I'm also a master gardener, and I've written a book on sustainable gardening for the Southeast, in which I talk about how to sequester carbon in the soils and using native plants, so that each person who gardens can do their little part in their yard. So I do have bookmarks with the information if you're interested. But that is the end of the presentation, and I hope, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Yes.
I'd like to hear again